On behalf of the Department of Physics, it is a pleasure for me to invite teachers and students to visit the observatory at the University of Saskatchewan. It is easy to kindle an interest in the discipline of astronomy. With the advent of the space age, the study of astronomy has been steadily increasing. This slide set will acquaint you with various features of the observatory, in particular the main instrument in the dome and the extensive displays prepared by the museum committee.
In 1907, the Saskatchewan legislature passed the University Act to establish a provincial university within the city of Saskatoon. The University of Saskatchewan was developed for the purpose of providing facilities for higher education in all its branches and enabling all persons without regard to race, creed, or religion to take the fullest advantage. Today, the U of S is the largest educational institution in the province. As the campus continues to thrive and grow, some of its buildings still maintain a unique historical character. One of the first few buildings established at the U of S was the Campus Observatory. Constructed in the late 1920s, it was used for astronomical research and viewing of celestial objects. Between 1928 and 1930, the Campus Observatory was built in two phases. The R.J. Aaron Contracting Company was hired to build the observatory tower in 1928 for a cost of $6,625. The firm completed the tower under budget on the 14th of April, 1929. In that same year, on the 20th of June, the same company was granted a second contract by the university, this time to build the small classroom wing of the observatory for $15,640. Work on the classroom was completed on the 23rd of January, 1930. A combination of university funding together with private donations allowed the observatory to be built. Today, a plaque is still present, mounted inside the dome with some recognizable names inscribed.
If you begin with the plaque that hangs on the inside of the wall in the upper dome area, there are some names there. John East comes to mind, Aidan Bowman comes to mind. These are names of some fairly significant figures in the past of Saskatoon. The fact that it was one of the few buildings on campus in the campus's beginnings is significant. I think it's quite exciting that just after the administration building was built, that somebody had the insight to build an observatory. Much smaller, of course, but the funding was there to do it.
As buildings and trees continue to grow up around the observatory, and technological advances have allowed researchers to dig deeper into the universe with more sensitive instrumentation, the observatory has been used less and less for research, and by the 1970s the observatory was being used almost exclusively for public outreach by allowing the public to tour the facility and view celestial objects. Today, it serves that same purpose by providing free tours on Saturday nights to the public.
We use the Campus Observatory for undergraduate labs in astronomy, and we also use it as an outreach focus for the general public. So we invite the public to come to the Campus Observatory on any Saturday night. We open it up year-round, and usually I have a couple of students or volunteers from the Royal Astronomical Society who staff the building for us and are there to answer questions and to help people take a look through the telescope there at celestial objects.
The observatory has gone through several modifications and upgrades since its inception in 1929. A primary figure in the 1970s who pushed for observatory renewal was Ed Kennedy, a former Assistant Dean of Arts and Science.
Ed Kennedy was involved in the College of Arts and Science. He was basically in charge of the University Observatory, both with its upkeep, maintenance, and tours. And so he was, in effect, my boss. And at that time, the observatory was in a little bit of disrepair, and he managed to scrape up $30,000 worth of funding to renovate the displays in the observatory and the dome that sits on top of the observatory. So during his time, And the time that I was working there, we watched the old dome removed and a new metallic ash dome come in. And we also watched a circular room downstairs under the telescope become a display room instead of a storage area. We also saw the introduction of space for a fully equipped darkroom and a library and washrooms for the public, proper washrooms for the public.
Also in the 1970s, the original 7-inch telescope lens was replaced with a 6-inch lens that is still used today.
It's a refracting telescope, a long tube refractor, 6-inch diameter front lens. And as a long tube refractor, it is very, very good for planetary viewing. And that really is where it shines. It is well anchored into a concrete pier, which runs all the way down through the display room in the basement area of the telescope, and then even further down into the ground under that.
In the 1950s, a sundial was installed on the south wall of the observatory. The sundial read, "I am a shadow, so art thou. I mark time, dost thou?" Beneath the quotation was an equation that could be used for calculating the time. The sundial proved to be useful for those who knew how to use it and those who didn't.
If you walked by there during the day, at the bottom of the sundial was the equation of time, which basically taught you that if you looked at the gnomon and it wasn't the right time, if you applied the equation of time, it would come out right, which it did. Over the years that it was restored several times, the black lettering was touched up and the layers of varnish or shellac, whatever they were putting on it, was improved. But I always found it, I was only there at night, really. Most of my time was spent there at night. And I always found it humorous at 10 o'clock at night when the last bus was leaving the University of Saskatchewan to take students home. Students would commonly walk by the walkway in front of the observatory, and every third or fourth student could be seen looking at the sundial, which by coincidence happened to have a shadow from the standing light right near it that hit 10 o'clock. And they would look at the sundial gnomon, they would look at the shadow reading 10 o'clock, they would look at their watch, and they would walk away happy that all was right in the universe.
Probably the greatest upgrade to the observatory was in the late 1970s when the original dome from 1929 was replaced with a new aluminum ash dome.
When I was associated with the observatory in the late 1970s, the observatory had just had an upgrade. The old chicken wire and plaster dome was replaced by a very nice aluminum ash dome, and that really dressed the observatory up. Several years after that, the observatory was chosen to be on the cover of the Ash Dome catalog. So it was a very picturesque observatory. It's in a beautiful location on campus, and the building had been taken care of and upgraded around that time.
Surprisingly, the original dome found a new home when Harry Tarasoff, a partner in a local asphalt company, found the dome in a scrapyard.
He was coming home from work one day in the north end of Saskatoon and saw it in an industrial yard, and saw it on the ground and knew immediately what it was. So he stopped and went in and asked the owner if he could buy it. And the owner was, well, no. I bought it, on sale, and I store pop bottles in it. Because he also collected pop bottles, I guess. But Harry spoke to him some more and gave him a good enough price, so he sold it.
Being a graduate from the Department of Physics, Tarasoff was a keen amateur astronomer and a passionate problem solver and builder.
He was always figuring out what made things work. He just was always thinking about those kinds of things. And I think that's what stargazing was for him. It wasn't just seeing a star, it was figuring out what the star was, how it got there, what happened that it got where it was.
In 2008, Tarasov passed away due to a blood clot. The observatory he built is a token of his memory and still remains with his wife Karen Larson in their backyard.
Often by having it in my backyard, people have stopped in the back lane, and I've been in the yard and asked me about it, rolled down their windows and asked me about it, and asked me what it is, actually. And I tell them, and often, they express that that's, great, and I tell them that there's one at the university, an observatory that has open hours for the public, that they can go and take their children and go and look through it. And it's free.
The observatory is open year-round on Saturday nights for public viewing, but it is also open for any significant celestial events. The observatory has been known to have hundreds or even thousands of excited sightseers show up to such events.
I think one of the most impressive sights I've ever seen in astronomy was looking through this telescope at Saturn for the first time when I was young. And it's really neat to be able to see the rings of Saturn for yourself through a telescope. So you can see Saturn's rings, you can see the moons of Jupiter. If you take other planets, when they are visible, can be seen. The different phases of Venus can be seen through the telescope as well. Then there's a number of other objects that are frequently visible, such as globular star clusters. You can see M13 in Hercules. There's some open star clusters, say the Pleiades in the wintertime. It just looks like the sky has been dotted with diamond dust or something. You just see glitters of stars, hundreds of stars filling up the field of view when you take a look at the Pleiades. So there's a number of star clusters like that. There's nebulae. You can take a look at one of the neatest ones is the Ring Nebula, which sort of looks like a smoke ring in space. So we can point the telescope at that and hopefully be able to see that strange circular pattern of light that's being emitted from what we call in astronomy a planetary nebula. So there's quite a variety of objects like that can be seen. And on special occasions, there are some really special objects that can be seen. Recently, last summer, we had the transit of Venus. So we had several hundred people in line on one afternoon where we put the telescope on the sun. We have a special filter that does allow us to safely view the sun with our campus observatory telescope, because that's otherwise a very dangerous thing to do. And so with the filter in place, we were able to watch Venus as it traveled across the face of the sun in between the clouds. We had a few clouds for that. So that was one very significant event. Fairly recently, we've seen also passing transits of the planet Mercury in front of the sun, and also comets. Probably the most significant event that I can remember at the campus observatory was the appearance of Halley's Comet. It was back in, I think it was way back 1986 or so, when Halley's Comet came around, 85, 86. And that's the most famous comet in history. And it's been coming by every roughly 75 years or so for I think we have now documented records of the appearance of Halley's Comet for 2,000 years. But the 1985 appearance was actually the worst one in 2,000 years. So people actually did need to come to a telescope to see Halley's Comet. So we opened it up every evening that the comet was visible, and we had huge crowds of people, several thousand people in line trying to see Halley's Comet. So we, over the course of several weeks, we had probably a good chunk of the population of Saskatoon actually got a chance to see Halley's Comet.
As the city of Saskatoon continues to expand and populate, light pollution is a growing concern for viewing conditions at the campus observatory.
Okay, light pollution is light that shines where you don't want it at night. So that includes sideways, where it does no work, or up into the sky, where it simply pollutes the atmosphere. And it's also light that is too bright for the purpose that's intended.
Despite detrimental light pollution that impedes our viewing conditions, the U of S Campus Observatory is being used on a weekly basis for public viewing. For nearly 100 years, the Campus Observatory has acted as a bridge to establish a connection between the University of Saskatchewan and the general public.
There's still a lot of bright objects, the planets and some of the brighter deep sky objects and bright comets we can easily show to people when they come to the observatory.
Still today, the stars generate a sense of awe in all of us. This is demonstrated by the interest and continuing attendance at the Campus Observatory on Saturday nights. Looking at the night sky, we start asking the most fundamental questions about our existence as a human species. The science of astronomy brings empirical evidence to those questions.
Every culture has a historical and scientific understanding of the stars. So astronomy is really important for that. I think for the big questions about the origins, our origins, the origins of the universe, astronomy really digs into those in amazing ways. It was because of astronomy that calculus was invented, and of course some people might think that that's a terrible thing, but it was the first time that I really understood, oh, that's what calculus is. You know, I'd taken calculus, but once I realized why it was there, then it just made a whole lot more sense.
I really got into it in my first year of university, and stuck with it right through to a PhD, just because I find it all just fascinating. Every aspect of sort of the picture that we have of our universe is it's such a complex and interconnected, sort of self-consistent picture that works so well in describing reality.
The university will continue to see new students with the same passions and interests related to astronomy that people have felt for millennia. We cannot ignore how the observatory has nurtured the sense of wonder in countless numbers of people since the early days of the university.
Society starts from the time a kid is born. And considering the university is a part of the community and a part of the society, and having these facilities, having this opportunity, having these establishments in the campus, by providing them access to the public, the university is not only serving the public, but the university is serving itself. So, because that is a good citizen, and the future lies with the younger population, and if we don't care about the younger population, we don't have a future.
It's more than a job, it's kind of something touching. We're giving you a chance to spend some time on a Saturday night talking about stuff we love and sharing that with other people, to the public, to anyone that wants to come and look and listen. So it's almost just like a fun thing to do. It's not really a job.
With the screening of this beautiful sunset, you realize that the end of this presentation has been reached. In closing, may I quote the opening sentence from Ferguson's Astronomy, a text which appeared well before the year 1800. Quote, "Of all the sciences cultivated by mankind, astronomy is acknowledged to be, and undoubtedly is, the most sublime, the most interesting, and the most useful." End of quote.